Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast. I'm Amanda.
I thought we were starting with more of a rougher entrance this time.
I changed my mind.
So we're doing it like the same way we always do it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Today we're doing the second part of Ryan's solo trip in Central Europe. So we're going to be covering Vienna in Austria, Ljubljana in Slovenia, and Budapest in Hungary. Take it away, my solo traveling friend.
So last time on the podcast, if you didn't listen to the last episode,
which if you haven't, you should probably just go do that.
Yeah, that would be episode 45.
See.
Called Solo Travel in Europe.
Czech Republic.
We talked about Prague, Olomouc, and Český Krumlov, which were the three places I went in the Czech Republic. My trip actually went from Prague to Vienna to Ljubljana to Budapest and then back to the Czech Republic, though. But we have edited that into two nice, logical segments for you, lovely listeners.
Thanks for listening.
So the first episode was about the Czech Republic. This episode's about Ljubljana, Budapest, Vienna.
I think they know that. I think they got it.
Have we covered that?
Yeah. So we had actually been to Salzburg in Austria the first time we traveled together, but we never made it as east as Vienna. And Vienna is quite a bit more east. Like it is pretty much as east as you can go in Austria. Is that right?
Yeah, I think a 30-minute drive from Bratislava. So that's capital of Slovakia. Yeah, it's like right against the border of Slovakia.
That's pretty cool. So what did you think of Vienna?
Well, so originally I wasn't planning to go to Vienna. I kind of wanted to stick to more like Czech Republic, Slovenia, Hungary, but I don't know. For some reason in my mind, I didn't really picture Austria being as far east as it was. Like I didn't have like a
damn Austria just got in the way.
I like think of it as Western Europe, so I'm like, okay, it's Western Europe. And then Vienna is like right there, like it's way farther east than Prague. And if you want to go, so I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll go Prague, Budapest, Ljubljana, and Ljubljana to Budapest is kind of like I don't know. There's something weird going on there. It takes forever to get there. A lot of the things will tell you to go back to Vienna and then down. So yeah, going from Prague, you really have to go to Vienna to get to Ljubljana. It's like a bit more expensive. So I just was like, oh, I'm going there. Might as well spend a couple nights, check out Vienna.
Mm-hmm. And was it worth it?
Yeah, it was a really nice city. It's more expensive. So that's the reason.
More expensive than like Czech Republic or Hungary or Slovenia?
Yeah, it really is more of like
Western Europe.
It is more east, but like, yeah, Western Europe. Like it's more expensive, more touristy. Like Prague is super touristy, but like it seems like you get, I don't know, it just prices go way up in Vienna. But it's a really beautiful place. I remember just walking around and they're just like gigantic. And once you get into the city center, there's just gigantic palaces everywhere, it seems like.
So there's mostly like palaces and like what else is there?
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of old shit, pretty much. Like,
like since it is so much more east, like was the culture still really similar to Salzburg? Like does it still have the Austrian culture? Does it take on sort of that Slovakian Eastern European culture?
I really don't know what that means.
Like, did you find that the culture was sort of, because I feel like Germany and Austria kind of have like very similar cultures and food, and like they speak Austrian German there, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what about food? Does the food take on some like Eastern European?
Not that I noticed. I wasn't there for very long, so it's hard to say, make culture judgments. And I don't really like to make culture judgments in general, because I think people give too much credit to culture as a thing that exists.
Okay.
But yeah, it seems like you're in, yeah, you can really noticeably tell that you're no longer in a former Soviet country.
Okay. That's cool.
Like it.
Yeah, that kind of answers my question.
Nicer.
I think
There's not the shitty generic apartment buildings surrounding the city.
That's cool. So what did you do while you were in Vienna? Like, I know you weren't there for very long. Do you feel like you got a chance to see some of the city?
So I just really, because I hadn't really intended on going there, I felt like I went in with really no expectations and then kind of had my very low expectations met.
That's a nice feeling. Like we've talked about, I think on our podcast about our road trip to Jasper, how having expectations often can leave you feeling super, super disappointed in a trip or a place. So it's kind of cool that you just didn't have any expectations going into that.
Yeah. And so pretty much everywhere I went, I was able to do a walking tour, except for Vienna. So I didn't really get to know really like what anything was. My hostel was kind of near the main train station, so it was out of the way of downtown. So on my one day there, I took the subway into downtown and had a map, got off at a random stop. The reason I was going to the stop was because I had found a restaurant. But then I, get out, start walking around, and like find myself inside this area where all these gigantic palaces are. And I'm like, whoa, this is pretty cool. Like these are all massive, intimidating buildings. Mm-hmm. But you have no context for why they're there, what they are, and like the history behind them. But yeah, I was just I had a really nice day of just like walking around, going to cafes, eating some delicious baked goods.
Pretzels.
Yeah, and just kind of happening on things, not really having much of a plan. So I was walking around and then saw they had a big ice rink slash ice pathy complex in front of one of the buildings. So I was like, oh, maybe I should rent some skates, go skate around. Yeah, it was cool.
That is really cool. I feel like that, like when you told me about that experience, I was like, that's one of the things that I really love about traveling is you can wake up in a city and you don't have any obligations the same way you do when you're in a routine or you're working a job. And it's like, you can just walk by an ice rink and be like, I'll go skating. That seems like a fun idea, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And it really made me notice how much, like thinking about it now, I think about how there I went in and I hadn't really like planned to go to this city. I didn't feel like I needed to get certain things out of it. I didn't feel like emotionally invested in like my time there. So it was really, just more like took what I wanted and didn't really feel a lot of pressure versus like a couple other times on my trip in Prague, feeling like, okay, I've planned to go here. Like I need this to be good because there's like, I don't know. It's like you've got kind of emotion riding on it because you are like investing your time and money in being at this place.
Totally.
And then the place after Vienna, I went to Ljubljana, and Ljubljana was kind of this like, I don't know, place that had intrigued me for a while. And like I had kind of built up expectations for. So really different than Vienna. Yeah.
And it's pretty interesting because, I don't really think I know anyone outside of you who's traveled Slovenia. What sort of sparked your interest to go to Slovenia? Like, where did you first hear about it?
I think the first time I heard about Slovenia was like when their hockey team made it to the Olympics in 2014.
And then like in that moment were you like, I should go there? Or
no, it was like I was considering going to Central Europe and I was looking on a map and I'm like, okay, where's cool? Like, oh, Slovenia, that's a random country. Like I was on the Wiki Travel, like read about Ljubljana, part of the EU, like fairly well-developed country, despite its geographic area. Like it's much more developed than its neighboring countries.
Yeah. Were you interested in going somewhere that people you knew hadn't been? Was that part of the intrigue with it, or was that not really a factor?
I think that contributes to it. Like it's kind of nifty. It's like, oh, Slovenia. No one knows where that is.
Straight up, I love going to places where like other people haven't been or like haven't thought of. I think it's like pretty cool, especially when you're pretty well traveled. That's cool. Do you feel like Ljubljana met your expectations? Because you said you went in with expectations.
Yeah. So I had read about it and watched a video. It was like a video of like Bitcoin in Ljubljana that someone had made there. just kind of like the downtown area. And I'd kind of forgotten about it when I actually did arrive in Ljubljana. Because it was like, heard it was a small city, but like the capital city. So I thought, oh, it'd be cool. It would be cool because I can walk around, but it should have nice things because it's a capital city. And then I come in on the train from Vienna, which was a long train ride, and it was raining. And as you come into Ljubljana, you see a lot of like shitty buildings and like rundown stuff. And then,
when you say like shitty buildings, like what does that look like?
So there was like graffiti on everything, houses with roofs caved in, like really industrial look. And then these like, it's like gray, like when you picture like former communist city, like that kind of stuff, like gray, rundown, graffitied, industrial looking shit.
Gotcha.
And then the train we were on kind of sucked as well. And there was no announcements, but like there was a lady coming by and I was like, is this Ljubljana? And she's like, yeah. And then like I get off the train and come out and I'm like, oh, because I'd read about how it's like a fairly well developed place. And I was like, really? Like this looks really shitty. It was raining and it didn't feel particularly good because I'd been on a train all day. So I walked from the train station down to the hostel, got to the hostel. The hostel's really nice, but I'm kind of like, why did I expect like such a nice place when it's like this? And then we actually Skyped and we talked about this, how I was feeling a bit like I built this place out to be something that it wasn't. Mm-hmm. My mind. And then I left after our conversation, walked literally like 30 meters down to so I'd come from the train station, which is kind of just on the outskirts of like the city center, and then come in to the hostel, which is like you're closing in on the city center. And then I continued towards the main square, which is like 30 meters away. Yeah. And you can see this river, cobblestone streets. There's no traffic in the historical center of the city, and it's just like pristine and picturesque and beautiful, and like everything I'd like wanted. And it was all right there. So it was this weird contrast between coming in and feeling really disappointed, and then like kind of sitting for like an hour with that, and then like continuing on and being like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I talked to you, we talked about how like you had high expectations from what you read, and I remember you saying that you felt like you're like, oh, it's dreary, like the houses aren't very nice, like the hostel's nice, but I don't really know. And you were planning to stay there for a few days, and I think you seemed like you were a little bit, I guess, like disappointed. And then it was cool talking to you after, and you're like, this place is amazing, like we have to come back here at some point.
Yeah, it's really drastic, the difference between how picturesque and how nice the historical center is, and then getting on the outskirts. But it's also like it's situated so you can see the Alps in the distance, and there's lots of green spaces within the city. So I think when it's raining and like that kind of contributes to it, and just like the area the train station is kind of like
not the nicest.
Yeah, which is standard.
Yeah.
But, because I had this like expectation of like, oh, okay, I'm going to get to Ljubljana. It's going to be awesome. Like I'll find some cool cafes and like spend time reading and writing and doing all this stuff. And I just kind of got a bit nervous about that not happening. Yeah.
Did you find that you met quite a few backpackers in Ljubljana? Because it doesn't seem like it'd be on like the major backpacker route, I guess.
Yeah. So I'd been Prague to Vienna, and that seemed like it was, you know, it's low season, but you couldn't really tell, you know, it seemed like things were busy and happening. And Ljubljana is really the first place I got where it was like really noticeable that it wasn't backpacker time of year.
Like it's kind of like getting off the quote unquote gringo trail.
Yeah, I think it's quite popular for people to go to in the summer and travel like that Croatia, Slovenia area, because there's tons of really nice hiking in Slovenia. But yeah, I met the 3 German guys who were trying to hitchhike to Greece. And then I had this kind of experience in Slovenia where I really enjoyed the city and like the things I was doing during the day, but then had really bad experiences trying to sleep in the hostel at night. Because the first, I can't remember which nights they were. There was a really old man there was 3 people who were staying in the hostel who weren't backpackers. And this is something I'd experienced in Vienna as well, where there was a guy who was like clearly just living at the hostel, a couple of them in the room. And I feel like people who are living in hostel rooms don't really, so we have an episode of the podcast where we talked about dorm room etiquette.
Yeah.
And it seems like if you're not a backpacker, you don't really pick that up.
Maybe not.
So just like on this trip, I encountered like the worst snorers I'd ever experienced in my life. Like it seemed like every night there was someone snoring loudly, like some fat European middle-aged man staying in the hostel. Anyways, so at this hostel in Ljubljana, there was this woman. So this is like a 10-bed dorm, and there's me, 3 German backpacker guys, and then 3 older people who are not backpackers. This old woman who I think lives at the hostel or stays there quite regularly, who would come into the room in the middle of the night and like leave the door open to the hallway with the lights on and like go back and forth. And she has this habit of like leaving the door open. So she'd come and leave the door open and then leave. And then you'd be like, it'd be 15 minutes later and you're like, where is this lady? It's like, why is the door still open? Like, why did she close the door?
Yeah.
There's this old guy who would snore, was kind of weird. The first day he came in, told me he was staying one day. And then we had this conversation and then I go do my thing. He's like 80 probably. So he's loud.
He was actually that old?
Yeah, speaks like broken English, tells me about how he lived in Australia, asked me about where I'm from. Canada. I was like, oh, it's really cold there. Anyways, so then he checks out the second day and I'm like, oh, thank God that guy's gone. Not like it wasn't that bad. I think he was snoring, but it wasn't brutal. Then he comes back the second day and like introduces himself to me again, says he's staying just one night, says he got there that day.
Whoa,
and
what? Like the same dude?
Yeah. And
That's
he's
so weird.
Completely forgotten about me.
What?
And then like
so
we
weird.
have like, I'm like, yeah, we met yesterday. He's like, oh yeah, where are you from? Canada. And he's like, oh, Canada, it's really cold there. And I was
weird.
Like, yeah, we talked about this yesterday.
Do you think he's like sick?
Well, I think he's old, really old, and kind of maybe losing his memory a bit. But I don't know
like
why.
Somebody who has like Alzheimer's or something shouldn't be in a hostel.
Continues to say he's like just staying one night, but maybe he's like living there.
That is strange. I wonder if he's related to somebody that owns a hostel.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I felt kind of so then the third person, this guy comes in at like 1 a.m. I think.
Okay.
Checks into the hostel at 1 a.m. He's staying in the bed on top of me, so I like wake up to this like dude like shining a light kind of like right in my face. Then he like climbs on top of the bunk bed. They're metal bunk beds, so it's like loud as shit. He has to put his sheets on. I think he turned the light on in the entire dorm room when he came into the hostel at 1 a.m. And then he puts his sheet on, gets into bed. And then after he gets into bed, he just starts snoring so loudly, like unbelievably loudly. So I couldn't actually sleep the entire night. At one point, I just like pulled out my phone and started watching YouTube videos.
Oh my gosh, that's so awful.
So I kind of felt frustrated with the hostel that they have all of these people who aren't
backpackers.
Yeah, it's like, and then also this. I was wondering what's going on like with this old man who kind of lies about how long he's been staying there. If like.
Yeah, that's a really strange situation. I know you sent me photos of the hostel and we'll post photos as well because it was really nice looking. That definitely is an interesting dynamic It kind of makes me think of how, like in Calgary, there's a hostel and you actually can't stay there unless you have an out of province ID. And, you know, as somebody who lives outside of Calgary now, I'm kind of like, oh, that feels like a bit frustrating. But then after staying at the hostel here in Canmore before we moved in and having people who are like living there, it feels like it's appropriate to have sort of those rules and regulations in terms of like ages or, you know, having people who are from like not that place, because having people who are kind of living in a hostel really does change the dynamic there.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what it is. Like, people like tend not to be as friendly because like they've been there a while. They don't really care about these people passing through. You don't have as much relatable, like when you're two people traveling, you've got something really in common versus like this person who's working and staying in a hostel. Mm-hmm. And also if like their things kind of spread out, usually the person living in the hostel might not be in the same age range as the backpackers. Yeah.
And I think too, like in our episode on dorm room etiquette, we do kind of like touch on, you know, there are sort of unspoken rules about hosteling. And I feel like when you're traveling long term, you kind of just like pick that up. Like it doesn't need to be said. Whereas if you're just like living in a hostel, I think it's a very different sort of like lifestyle dynamic. You do get people with different age ranges and whatnot.
Yeah. So to back this up, I think I started rambling about my hostel experience when you asked me if there's many people traveling Ljubljana, mm-hmm. right? I guess I started talking about how I enjoyed my experience during the day, but really didn't enjoy it at night. I was like kind of like cursing my existence in that hostel. Why am I here? I can't sleep at all. But there seemed to be a couple other hostels. I went on a walking tour and there was like over 20 people on this walking tour, which kind of wasn't good. But there was lots of other young people staying at other hostels, which seemed like they were having more of a enjoyable time.
That's good then. Do you think like next time, if you were to go back to Ljubljana, you'd stay somewhere different then?
So the hostel I stayed at was really, really nice. Like
what hostel was it?
It's called like Hostel Trezor.
Okay.
Trezor, which means vault in Slavic languages. And it's, really cool. There's like quotes painted everywhere, really cool facilities. But just, they had, I think, just in order to get beds filled, taken people who contributed to a not good experience. But the one thing, I went after that night and was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to change rooms. And the guy at the desk was like really accommodating, moved me into a smaller dorm room, didn't charge me anything else to do that. So.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I might stay there again. I don't know.
Debatable. So what else did you do in Ljubljana? Like what sort of, like you went on a walking tour?
Yeah. And then Ljubljana is really like, it's small, compact, a city center. So you can walk around easily. There's a castle overlooking the city. So you can walk up to this castle. It takes like 15 minutes to get up there. And you have this brilliant view over the city, out to the Alps. And then there's just lots of like cool cafes. There was this one tea house place that I hung out at quite a bit where I journaled and sat.
Just sat there?
Well, journaled, but read a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was a bit warmer than Prague and Vienna. So one day I got a sunny day and was able to sit outside and read, which was really nice and something I felt like I'd been missing in my first two stops.
Like kind of craving some vitamin D and just like being outside.
Yeah. And just being able to sit outside and read and like take a break, not doing anything outside.
Yeah.
I think feeling really cold outside, like I felt like this pressure to go to places to do things. And when you're like inside a restaurant, you don't really feel comfortable hanging out there for a long period of time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of awkward if you just spend like $2 on a coffee and then you're going to spend like 4 hours there. Like it's totally fine, but it does sort of feel like it's not okay, I guess, because you should be like spending more money because you're utilizing their space, mm-hmm. which I totally get.
Yeah. So I definitely go back to Ljubljana. I didn't really like do a whole lot, but it's just a really nice place to be.
Yeah.
And especially in the summer, I think there's tons of good hiking around there, and some other places in Slovenia that I'd like to check out, but didn't get a chance to.
Cool.
So then I moved on from Ljubljana and took a train to Budapest, which was long and more expensive than, I think the best option is to car share. You can car share. It takes like 4 hours, costs like 20 euros or something.
Yeah.
Versus taking a 40 euro train that takes like 8 hours.
Okay. So there's like a significant
it's a very
difference in time.
roundabout way to get to Budapest.
You need Dagny Taggart on that. You need her to build a railroad for you.
Yeah. Some transcontinental railroads.
Yeah. So if you were going to do it again and you were going to car share, how do you sort of go about arranging that?
So I think the biggest car sharing website in Europe is called BlaBlaCar.
Blah, blah.
Yeah, like BLA car dot something. I think it's .com, but it might be something else. So yeah, just Google BlaBlaCar, and then you pick where you're going from, where you're going to, and it will tell you people who are going along that route, and how much they're charging, what time they're doing it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool service. I feel a bit regretful that I didn't do it because it seems like a cool way to meet people and get places. It seems a lot more effective than a lot of trains and buses were.
Yeah, a lot more efficient for sure.
Yeah. I know I met a couple people, like those German guys who were hitchhiking from Germany. They were on school break and they were just like, okay, we're going south. And then someone happened to be going to Slovenia. So that's how they got to Slovenia. They weren't really intending on going there. They just wanted to go south. They figured they'd end up in like Italy or Spain or something.
Cool.
And ended up in Slovenia. And then once they got there, they're like, oh, hopefully we can get down to Greece. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. I feel like hitchhiking is a cool way to travel and have an experience and meet people.
Mm-hmm. It's super affordable, obviously, too.
Yeah.
Like you're not, a lot of time when you're traveling, your actual travel is your biggest expense. So to save on that is huge.
Yeah. And I think something that holds me back about wanting to hitchhike is, I really believe that you should be paying for what you get, like not asking for things for free, not expecting people to give you things for free. Because when you take something for free, what you're giving is like yourself instead of, trading value for value.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So car sharing, you still get this experience of meeting people, you pay for it. So that's kind of off the table. There's no like free and then like guilt associated with you taking something from someone else.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it'd be a cool experience for sure.
Yeah. So I think I'd like to do it. I know in different countries, there's different websites. In Slovenia, they have their own car sharing website that I think is a bit better than BlaBlaCar. I don't know what that one is called. It's something in Slovenian. But if you Google Slovenian car sharing,
you could find it.
Yeah.
Cool. So arriving in Budapest, I mean, I've heard amazing things about Budapest. So I was pretty envious that you were there. What were sort of your first impressions of the city?
So I got there at night, not too late. Train station, get in the metro, head off to the area that my hostel's in. And yeah, I got off the metro stop at the area my hostel's in, and it was like a really bumping area. There's like malls and shops and bars and restaurants and like lots of cool stuff all around. So
cool.
I immediately felt good about being there.
Yeah.
I guess coming in, yeah, when you're moving cities, especially like it was my first time traveling alone, moving from a city you've gotten comfortable into a city you don't know, it feels a bit, I don't know, I felt a bit nervous, maybe a bit scared, especially like I don't know how to get there. I don't know what this area is going to be like. It's a bit late.
Yeah.
So getting there and finding out there's tons of people walking around, tons of shops. It's nice. I felt very comfortable walking around and finding my hostel. So that was a good.
Yeah, that's a nice like relief when you get off the train when it is dark out to just find that it's not like deserted streets or anything.
Yeah. And then I got to the hostel. It's really nice, small hostel. And they pulled out this map and started showing me all the things you can do in Budapest. And there is a ton of stuff to do there.
Yeah.
the infrastructure for backpackers and for tourists is really well developed. There's like, you can do all sorts of stuff, fill as many days as you want with activities.
So obviously you weren't there for enough time to just like do everything. What did you like? How did you pick and choose? What did you pick and choose? What did you end up doing?
So I spent 5 nights and like 6 days in Budapest, and I switched hostels halfway through that, which was a really good experience.
Why do you say it's a good experience? Just like changing scenery, not getting in, like stuck in routine, kind of like we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah, and just being able to see like a city from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a different area, so you're kind of figuring out that new area more. Meet some new people who stay at this other hostel. Yeah, that's kind of it. But anyways, so over my time there, I was still kind of trying to focus on like finding cafes to journal and read.
Yeah.
As like a couple hour a day activity. But it's very scenic river with like hills and viewpoints on it.
Cool.
It's like the Danube, I think is the big river there.
Yeah.
But one thing I really liked about Budapest was that there's a company that does free walking tours, like the tip-based walking tours, like you find in almost every.
Is it New Europe or is it a different company?
It's a different company.
Do you remember the name or no?
No.
Okay.
I don't remember which company I did it with. I think there's multiple companies doing it. I know in Prague there's like 10 of them now.
Oh, okay.
But
wow.
In Budapest, they do the normal one, which kind of takes you around to all the major spots and gets you kind of acquainted with how where the main attractions are. They don't really give you too much history or anything like that. Kind of just get you a lay of the land.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a Communism Tour that took you to some like bigger places that were, I guess, points of interest for during the communist times in Hungary.
Yeah.
And then give you a lot more stories and details about what life was like in the communist period. And then there's also a Jewish tour, which takes you to the Jewish quarter of Budapest and tells you about some of the history of the Jewish people there and like their experience during the Holocaust. And
that's pretty interesting. So you did all of those?
I didn't do the Jewish tour.
Okay.
I did the communist tour and the other one.
And you felt like they were definitely worth like the tip that you gave at the end?
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
you would definitely recommend to get acquainted with a huge city?
The only drawback for me was how large the groups were. Like really, really large groups. And part of going on walking tours for me that I found really enjoyable is having the opportunity to meet other travelers. On my trip, there was lots of points where I kind of started to feel a bit lonely. And on some of the walking tours, I'd have like opportunity. You're spending a couple hours with people, you get to chat and like really connect with people.
Mm-hmm. And like get to know people a little bit more than you do just in passing sort of thing, or in passing at the hostel or on a train. Yeah.
And I think when you're in a bigger group, it's kind of like a bigger hostel. Like people feel they're kind of just more in their own, like they're with the people they came with. It's less obvious which people are there by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt that it was a bit harder to connect with people.
Yeah.
And then other than that, I did a lot of walking around to see, there's just like lots of cool buildings you can look at and lots of cool places you can go to get good views. I think the main attraction for a lot of backpackers in Budapest is the partying.
Yeah.
So they're called ruin bars, and is like kind of the famous bars in Budapest. And so they're kind of these like smaller old apartment complexes where the apartment buildings have courtyards and then a whole bunch of apartments. And then so after, I guess in the early 2000s, there's lots of ruined apartment buildings around Budapest. And so these people come in and are like, oh, this looks cool, we'll start a bar here. So they kind of fix the structural integrity of the building, but not really any of the other stuff. It's kind of ruined.
Yeah.
And then they just open a bar. And then over time, I guess, people build cool features into all the rooms. So like at one of them, I think there's like a car in one of the rooms. One of the rooms is like everything's on the ceiling.
Cool.
So like tables and chairs and stuff stuck to the ceiling. There's like weird art, different music. All sorts of different stuff happening in all the different rooms. So you can go and check out a bunch of these ruin bars. And that's what a lot of people do in Budapest. Like partying is kind of like the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast before, but I don't drink anymore, which doesn't mean I don't like go out and do stuff, but it kind of means I end up not going out and doing stuff at night.
Yeah. So you didn't go to the ruin bars. I mean, you've talked a lot about, well, I guess with me, maybe not on the podcast, but you're doing a year of sobriety. Is it something that you would go back? Like, obviously you're not looking to have crazy blackout drunk nights, which is something you'd go back and feel like you could enjoy just like having a beer or two.
So I went to one, the Communism Tour ends at one of these ruin bars, and then they show you some stuff there. It seemed like a lot of people I met traveling had a really cool experience at these ruin bars.
Mm-hmm.
And so in regards to me finishing a year of sobriety, I'm not even sure I'm going to stop or going to start drinking again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the experiences I had on my trip was I went out with a group of people who were drinking, and it's not something I'd really do a lot, like go out with people who are drinking, being sober.
Yeah.
And it's just like reminds you of, people like drinking really like, people get kind of dumber and like don't know where they're going and keep asking the same questions. Everyone gets confused. Like people stop talking about issues that are really like intellectually stimulating and start talking about like nothing really.
Yeah.
Just,
well,
like,
alcohol is
laughing.
escape from that sort of thing. That's why people go for like drinks on Fridays after work. 'Cause it's like, oh, the week's over. Like, I just want to forget about everything that happened for the last 5 days, when they don't really enjoy what they're doing, or, you know, it's stressful and they don't feel completely happy.
Mm.
I can definitely see that.
Yeah. So I don't know if I went back, I probably wouldn't go to a ruin bar. I don't know.
I guess it's hard.
It's kind of cool. Like if that's your thing, like I think
it's like a cool concept. It sounds like it's something where you could go and just have, you know, a beer and, you know, check it out, and it could be enjoyable.
Yeah. And I think it's cool that it's like one of the things to do in this city is like these really cool, distinct bars.
Mm-hmm.
That like, you know, some entrepreneur has come up with a nifty idea and then kind of turned into this really big thing.
Yeah.
And the whole Jewish quarter of Budapest has become kind of like party central for foreigners.
Yeah.
And then there's, outside of that, you can go, Turkish baths are really, really popular in Budapest. They're all over the place. So that's a big tourist attraction. There's also caves underneath the city that you can go caving in and do cave tours. There's a cathedral in a mountain, in like a cave in a mountain. There's a hospital bunker. There's like a couple other like communism bunker tours you can do.
Mm-hmm.
A nice gigantic park, lots of cool stuff. And then the price is really right in
pretty affordable.
Yeah, I went out for an all-you-can-eat meal with someone I met at a hostel, and I think it cost, I'm forgetting what it cost now. It was like the equivalent of like $5 Canadian.
Wow.
For all you can eat.
That's really cheap.
Really, really cheap.
Yeah. So coming to the end of sort of Budapest, is there anything else you wanted to touch on about that city, or anything else our listeners should know about it?
So one thing I really enjoyed about Budapest was doing this communist walking tour and getting more of that history about the city.
Yeah.
And it's something we talked about in the last podcast, but I was walking around Budapest at night, which is really nice to do. You can go up. They have this Liberty Monument on a hill. It's a Liberty Monument built by the communists, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But and then there's a palace on the hill, and so you can walk along the river and see all these illuminated buildings that are really cool. Mm-hmm. And that's really when I started thinking about like, oh, it's weird how all these buildings are like, it's like cathedrals, palaces, parliaments, like these just kind of monuments to power. the thought that we talked about on the last podcast was just how it's weird in Europe. A lot of these monuments are to really like people who have taken a whole bunch of money from like average citizens and then built these like opulent structures which served really no functional purpose. So that thought, and then, but it is nice to walk around and look at them.
Yeah. So would you go back to Budapest again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Kind of just recounting my trip at all after, I feel like I've gotten a bit sketchy hopping back between thoughts in my mind.
Yeah. When
I was in Slovenia, I met quite a few people who were going down into Croatia. And same thing from Budapest, met a lot of people who were going that Croatia, Romania, like down into like Bosnia and that area.
Yeah.
And that really like kind of, I don't know, it was like, ooh, that sounds exciting. Like I want to do that. I want to go there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I think the place I would be really happy to start in Budapest and then go down in that direction. And that's something that I think I thought about overall on my trip, was that it was kind of missing a bit of a sense of adventure. After going to South America for 6 months, you kind of have some cities like Buenos Aires where it's, you know, it's safe. It's relatively safe. It's relatively
yeah,
but it's like more similar to what you get in North America. You feel more at home.
Yeah, or you like Europe.
Navigate fairly easily. It's like same thing with like Santiago and Chile.
Even like Lima and Peru as well.
Yeah, but there's like this.
There's like more
it's
small
like it's like an in and out. Like it's like you have these kind of experiences with like crappy infrastructure and like crazy buses, and things are like a challenge that normally aren't a challenge. And it's more adventure. It's more fun. So going to Europe, going to Central Europe, I was kind of expecting it maybe to be a bit
more challenging than it was.
Maybe a bit like, challenging. It was just really easy. Like you got on the train was nice. It was quiet. The hostels were nice.
So in saying that, do you feel like Central Europe would be a good place for somebody to travel if they didn't have much travel experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you were thinking about, I think it was weird talking to my parents, because I think for us, like Prague, Czech Republic is just very much like, you know, that's Europe. But for my parents, it was still like, oh, like Czechoslovakia, like former communist country. Like,
yeah,
they were kind of like, oh, it's kind of sketchy that you're going there, versus me, I'm like, whatever. But if you were feeling any hesitations about going to Budapest, Slovakia, Slovenia, Czech Republic, that neighborhood, like, I think it's really not remarkably different than the rest of like Spain or France, other than it being significantly cheaper. So I definitely recommend
Which is
it.
like a pretty big win, I think.
Yeah.
Because Europe is pretty expensive. So maybe a nice option for anyone out there who's looking to do a trip that is more on a budget, because we've talked quite a bit about how Europe is more expensive. So maybe adding in some of the places from Central Europe is a good option to save money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the one place I stayed at Prague, the average night was something like $8 Canadian. No, that's not true. It probably ended up being 10, because they had like one night was $5 Canadian, and then the next night would be like 12.
Yeah,
and
just with weekends and stuff. Yeah,
and then the next night would be something else.
That's cool. It's pretty affordable, I'd say. Like I remember staying in like Paris and paying like 30 euros a night, which is who knows how much in Canadian.
Yeah, and I think in Prague and probably in Budapest in high season, the prices would get up quite a bit higher. But like food, drinks, and accommodation are considerably cheaper over there. So if you're looking for a place to extend your trip, like you're thinking about going to Europe, or like, you know, I've only got money for a month, like you could probably make that 2 months if you went farther east.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Cool. So check out the show notes at www.theworldwanders.com. Shoot us an email if you have any questions or comments at theworldwanderspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.